sir. Welcome to COASTER-net Uncut.
What's up, Ride Warriors? Welcome back to COASTER-net Uncut. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois, joined by Mr. Danny Miller once again. Tonight, Danny, we are going to continue the European vacation here, and we are going to talk about one of the bigger parks on your trip. We're going to talk a little bit about Heide Park.
Yes, we're running the gauntlet here, as you'll notice through this series of videos here that we're wearing the same shirts the entire time because we're running through the gauntlet after Christmas here. The day after Christmas, we're running through all of these here, and we're going to wrap these up by the end of the year. So, we're going through it here, and today we're talking about Heide Park Resort in Soltau, Lower Saxony, Germany. Down there south of Hamburg. So we're going to jump right in because I've got a lot to talk about on this on this park. There's a lot. So let's start off with, this is a Merlin park, so you will see a lot of the same types. You have the same feel that you have at some of the other Merlin parks, like a Thorpe Park or an Alton Towers. You've got a lot of that same feel to it. Very nice park, again, another pretty park. Very big lake in the middle of the park, which is interesting, but it also makes it somewhat tough to navigate because it's very difficult. It's sort of hard to get from one side to the other because there's not like a straight path. You have to go around this lake the entire time. I'm Google searching sort of an aerial view here, or at least a map, to kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at here. So when you first walk in, you kind of have the lake in front of you. You can go left, you can go right. There's rides on the left, there's rides on the right. It's a pretty big park. So why don't we start with some of the non-coaster rides that are of note here. So one of the things I was really looking forward to was the How to Train Your Dragon Land, which is their kiddie area of the park. They have a few flat rides with dragons, sort of like the Flying Dumbos, but it's flying dragons. And they have the Dragon Grotten, Drakengrotten, which is Dragon Grotto, I guess is the translation there, or Dragon's Lair. It's a dark ride. It's a short dark ride. It's got an outdoor area where you go through like the little Norse village, the Viking village there, and then you go into the cave is the second half of the ride, where there's some dragons. There's a fire and ice dragon, which is kind of cool. A little bit of dueling dragons going on there. And then you see the animatronic Toothless and Hiccup inside there, which is pretty cool. And then you come back out. It's not a super long ride, very family friendly and kid friendly, but really, really fun. I'm a big fan of the How to Train Your Dragon series. Yeah. I like the movies a lot. I think
also just recommend that I watched it this week, like on Christmas Eve. The How to Train Your Dragon Homecoming Christmas special is actually really good. You should watch it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. I'd not heard that. I
think it's on Hulu somewhere, so you can find it on Hulu.
Okay, I am certainly going to have to check that out. Drakengrotten, I believe it was called. They're a very, very fun little family-friendly dark ride. The other dark ride here that they actually had a Ghostbusters 4D shooting ride, which was a lot of fun. We had a great time here with this. I won't go too much into it because we've got a lot to talk about, but if you're a Ghostbusters fan, an 80s movie fan, and you're a fan of these shooting dark rides, this is one of the most well-done shooting dark rides that I've been on in quite some time. The guns work. The 3D was very, very well done. The theme was well done. The vehicles sort of look like the Ghostbusters cars. Everything was really, really well done on this ride here. We had a lot of fun on this ride, and we only got to ride it once. We didn't go around again because it was sort of a rainy sort of day in the morning. A lot of coasters to ride, and the park was only open 10 to 6 the day we were there, since we were there sort of during the week. So we didn't have a terribly long time to get on all the rides. But the Ghostbusters ride was certainly a fun one, and certainly one you want to check out there. We also checked out their log flume, which I think at this park was called, hopefully I'm not mixing my parks, I think it's the We tried to do as many of the log flumes and water ride type rides that we could. So this just sort of your standard log flume, nothing really to write home about, but something that we wanted to do while we were there. So certainly a good supporting cast of non-coaster rides here at this park already with Drachengraten, Ghostbusters, and the Wild Wasserbahn. Let's talk roller coasters now because there's quite a few of them. There's 9 in all here at Heide Park Resort. We'll blow through a few of them. Indy Blitz, their little kiddie coaster, which it's always funny. And I didn't talk about this when we talked about Hansa Park, but it's true with Hansa Park, Walibi Holland, and also here at Heide Park. A lot of these parks have American Wild West themed areas. And it's really, really funny to see because we have German themed areas and we'll have like England themed areas and Italian themed areas in some of our theme parks, right? And then it's really funny as Americans to go to these European parks and all of their American themed areas are Wild West. And it's really funny because that's their, I guess, perception of America. Or
a bunch of cowboys, Danny. That's what we do in America.
Right. So the Indy Blitz is just kind of a kiddie coaster in their Wild West area. And I think it was Hansa Park. I think it was Hansa Park where the saloon, which was like a restaurant they had, actually literally said, wipe the shit off your boots before entering. Like that's just what's literally on the sign. Like that's what they translated. So anyways, so that was kind of funny. That was at Hansa Park, not at Heide Park. But, I thought this was a good place to throw that in because their kiddie area is Wild West themed. So that's Indy Blitz. Grotten Blitz is their mock-powered mine train style ride. Sort of goes in and out of what looks like sort of a ski chalet, if you will, a Swiss ski chalet. If you're familiar with a Thunder Run at Canada's Wonderland or some of the other mock-powered mine train coasters, this is very, very similar to those. It's a custom layout, but very, very similar to those. Let's see, what else do we have here? We have Limit, which is their Vekoma SLC, which was absolutely terrible, as expected. This was probably, we rode 4 or 5 SLCs on the trip, and this was probably the worst one. El Condor, which was the original one at Walibi Holland. Vampire at Walibi Belgium was not fun. MP Express at Movie Park was okay. This one was terrible. Even sitting in the back seat, which historically, in my experience, is the smoothest of the seats, this one was not a good time. This was a once and done for sure. Big Loop is their Vekoma looping coaster, a custom Vekoma looping coaster. Fairly smooth. It's actually got the trains from the old Alton Towers corkscrew, the old Vekoma trains. What's on a lot of the boomerangs over here in the States doesn't have the best. Double loop, turnaround, double corkscrew, helix. Nothing really to write home about. One of their older coasters. This was another once and done here. Then we've talked about some of those. Then we'll start to get into a little bit of the better rides. Desert Race, which is their Intamin launch coaster, and this for me was a little bit of redemption here because this is a clone of Rita at Alton Towers. Or a near clone. I think the ending is slightly different based on where the brake run is. But for me, I didn't get to ride Rita at Alton Towers because it was down most of the day while we were there, and I talked about that in the last show. But Desert Race is a near clone of Rita, so this was sort of a little bit of getting that experience. Now, this was a once and done for us because we wanted to ride some of the more unique rides, but this is a fun ride. A good launch, some good speed. It was smooth. Some good airtime over those crossover hills. It really doesn't do much. The layout is kind of just sort of like a figure 8, if you will. It launches, you make a right-hand turn, you do a big turn, you do a crossover hill, then you do a sweeping left-hand turn, another crossover, another right-hand turn on the inside of the first one, another crossover, and then you do a final bunny hop into the brake run. It really isn't too complicated of a ride. It's 3 crossover hills, a bunny hill, with helixes in between. It's a quick ride, it's a fast ride, but it's a fun ride, and it is an intense ride. So I'll give a thumbs up for Desert Race here. And that's really all I have to say about that. It's really kind of just plopped down in a patchy, in a brown patchy piece of land off to the side of the park with a helicopter that sort of hovers there. So that's pretty much it there. So then let's talk about Bobbin, which is their mock bobsled coaster. This is sort of perched up.
Not much of a coaster.
Well, yeah. So some of us on this show would not consider this a coaster, according to their coaster count. So Bobbin is sort of up on the hill. So at the very back of the park, at the back side of the lake. So if you're talking about around the lake here, if you go left, you get to like the Transylvania area, which is where Fleur de Demon is, and then Big Loop that's kind of like off to the side. The Transylvania area is its own thing, kind of off to the back side. It's kind of secluded. Back on the main drag, you have Big Loop on the left side of the lake, and then when you get to the back of the lake, you can either go right and go towards Colossus, and then Desert Race is off to the right side of the lake as you continue around that, sort of along the lake. Across from Colossus is Indy Blitz, and at the back of the lake, if you go left, you go basically down a dead-end pathway, which goes back to Limit, the SLC, and then farther back is Bobbin. And I think the entrance to their hotel is actually back that way too. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the hotel entry. So Bobbin is the station. If you're following along on RCDB, I think photo 1 is sort of an overview of Bobbin. Yeah. And the station is a very, very elaborate looking Swiss ski chalet, Swiss ski lodge. Very, 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 very pretty, very decorative. So you go out, you go through the lift hill, and this is a very unique layout compared to some of these other bobsled type coasters. So you do a couple of turns, couple of helixes, then you hit a mid-course brake run, and then you pick up a lot of speed, right? So the station is sort of up on a hill, and you do the lift hill to go up a little bit more, and the first half there where you get to the mid-course brake run takes you kind of back to station level. Then you do all these turns and drops and whatnot, and you pick up a lot of speed because you're still really far off the ground. Like, this is probably still Avalanche at King's Dominion height off the ground. So the whole second half of the ride, you're picking up all this speed, and you are booking it. And towards the end, you're going through you're down on the ground where you're sort of in trenches, and it's got like the ski chalet style roofs over top of you, so it's like you're kind of in a tunnel, but you can still see sort of out the cracks and the slits just below the roof line, and you're in very close quarters going very, very, very fast. And then you come to rest finally at the end of the ride. You hit the brake run, and then you go up a huge lift hill back up to the station. Really? So it's really, really cool. So really, in the sense we talk about, you think about it, when you first get on this ride, it's like, boy, we're going to waste, there's going to be a lot of missed opportunity here because the station is so high, we're not going to be able to get up all that speed. Well, you do get up all that speed, and very much like a Ninja at Six Flags Magic Mountain, where you have a lift hill to start the ride and a lift hill to end the ride because you end at the low point. The lift hill is actually the end of the ride that brings you back up. So if you're familiar with Ninja, the suspended coaster at Magic Mountain, it's very much like that, where you start off with the lift hill to go high, and then you go all the way down, you burn off all your speed, and you get to the very bottom, and then rather than wasting all that extra real estate that you could have by going down low to the ground, they simply end the ride with a lift hill to bring you back up to the top. So that's good for a couple reasons, right? First, you get some outstanding speed. This is by far the fastest bobsled coaster I've ever been on. You are really, really booking it through. And certainly watch a POV of this ride because you really, really get some good speed going towards the end. But it's also good for blocking purposes because you can have another train on that lift hill, and when it gets to the top of the lift, that acts as the block brake right outside the station. But then you can have another one parked at the bottom of the lift hill. So they can actually run, I think, like 5 or 6 trains on this ride, and they're constantly moving them through. So the capacity of this ride is very, very good for a bobsled coaster where you sort of had the inline seating. 1,750 riders per hour, according to RCDB, which is like that's on par with some of your B&M coasters. So to get that out of a bobsled coaster, that tells you how good the capacity of this ride actually is. And the crews were really, really working very well. Used to be called Schweizer which is German for Swiss bobsled. Bobbahn is just bobsled. Schweizer is what the one at Europa Park is called. So fine, we'll talk about that in the Europa Park show. But this I think is this is the bobsled coaster when you want to talk about the we talk about Avalanche at King's Dominion. There's one at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, which is very, very good. The one at Europa Park is very good as well. This one is certainly the fastest of those. At least it feels like it. Top speed's only 33 miles an hour, but I'll tell you what, when you're in those cars that flex at the midpoint and when you're close to the ground and in tunnels, 33 miles an hour feels a hell of a lot faster. So this one was definitely a fun one here.
I don't know. It sounds like Storm Chaser speed to me.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see here. We talked about Big Loop, Bobbin, Desert Race, Groton Blitz, Indy Blitz, Limit. Let's talk about now the big 3 here. Let's talk about Croquet, which is their B&M dive coaster. And Croquet to me, and also the one at Efteling, which we'll talk about, Baron 1898, or as they say in Dutch, Baron 1898. They're 6 across trains, not the 8 across or 10 across trains that we're used to on a Shikara, Valraven, Griffin, Yukon Striker type of ride. If there's anything I learned from these smaller dive coasters over here, is they are much more agile and are able to perform maneuvers that are much tighter. And I think that's a benefit. Now, Croquet is a very short ride. So it's themed to a Kraken, as you might guess. And if you're following along on RCDB, you will see that there is lots of theming. The station is themed to sort of this old abandoned castle by the sea. And the vertical drop goes down into a pirate ship that is being imminently swallowed up by the Kraken. So originally, when this ride opened, it didn't have any theming there at the bottom. It had just the water splash. Well, after a few years, they built the pirate ship. And it's interesting because they couldn't build the pirate ship over the bottom of the drop because they would have had to remove the water splash. But the track was already built to allow for the water splash. So they would have had to either redesign the concrete trough or be a little bit just a little bit clever about how they built this pirate ship. So what they did is they actually built the pirate ship so that it looks like sort of like how when the Titanic sank, the stern went up in the air. Mm-hmm. That's how they've designed the pirate ship, so that the stern is up in the air and you actually go through the Kraken's mouth, which is sort of spitting out the backside of the ship as you're starting to level out. So it's still as you're going down the drop. And then you emerge from the front end, the bow of the boat, where the Kraken tentacles are pulling down just as you get to the water splash. So you do the vertical drop, and it's a much better visual, too. It's very much like an Oblivion at Alton Towers, or even a Yukon Striker at Canada's Wonderland, where you're looking down into that tunnel. You hit the holding brake, and you're looking down, and you're looking square into the mouth of the Kraken that is swallowing the pirate ship as you look at it, and it's got the tentacles wrapped around it. Very, very cool visual. You drop down, you go through the tunnel, and then you have the big water splash, right? Now, if you're on the left side of the train, so you do the water splash, and then you go through the Immelman loop, and then you come back, you go over an airtime hill, and then you turn and you hop back onto the brake run. It's a very short ride. You've got the drop, an Immelman, an airtime hill, and a turn into the brakes. Very short ride. If you're on the very left edge of the train, you actually get wet from the water splash that you just did as you come out of the Immelman. So it's very, very cool. The other dive coasters don't really do that. They're sort of a long straightaway, and then they sort of do a turnaround. Griffon, I think you can get a little bit of the residual, but that's after you do a turnaround. If it's a humid day where the mist doesn't really dissipate quickly. Shikara, you certainly don't get wet if you're on the train.
There's a good picture of it. Number 45 on our CBB shows that exact what you're talking about.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's a very good picture. So if you're on the left side of the train, when you come to the top of that Immelman and straighten out, you can get a very nice mist on the left side of the train there on a hot and humid day. We got a little bit of it. It was mid to low 70s and intermittent clouds when we were there. This is very much a short but sweet type of ride. It's got a great drop. The Immelman's a lot of fun. Some really good airtime on the hill there. And a good theme and good visuals there. It's what it looks like. It's what you would expect this ride to be. Very, very fun. Rode it twice and enjoyed both rides on it. So, that's kind of the deal here. It's a very good supporting ride and a very good number 3 for this park.
And it's also exciting because San Diego, according to a lot of the releases, are saying they're going to have the 6 Across train too. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that ride looks like it's going to have a 0G roll, perhaps?
It's going to have a lot of cool stuff. Like, a lot of people are really excited about Emperor out in San Diego, to really give us this new style or this smaller style dive coaster that we don't really have. Like, you have all the big ones. But this is going to – I think Emperor is going to turn it on its head a little bit. So I'm excited to see what that actually ends up being.
So Emperor is going to have an Immelman, a barrel roll, and a corkscrew. So the barrel roll, Baron has a 0G roll in it. This one does not, just has the Immelman, but Baron has a 0G roll. So I would expect that Emperor, that's actually going to be a very fun element with those 6 Across trains. They can certainly take them with a little bit more zip with the 6 Across trains. They're not as big and clunky, I guess, as the 8 or 10 Across trains or the wing coaster trains that seem to sort of lag through some of those roll elements. I mean, these are certainly the type of trains that could take such elements with a pretty brisk pace. So if this ride is any indication.
So wait, so they added the boat later on?
Yes, it did. So originally when it first opened, the open area of water between the splashdown and the Immelman had a Kraken mouth, just with the teeth sticking out.
Yeah.
And that used to shoot a plume of water. They took that out and instead built the boat a few years later.
Okay.
And that's why if you look at
picture 11, like, it's a completely different look.
Yeah, so picture 11, they have sort of the wreckage and some of the tentacles sticking out around the track. But the mouth is off to the side. So picture 47 is what it currently is now. Yeah. And I think that was just done a year or two later. So the ride opened in 2011 and the boat was built in 2012. So it was just a year later. But you can see the later pictures from like 47 on. 49 is a really good picture of how it enters the boat before it gets to the splashdown area, which is pretty cool. The first picture, number 1, is actually a really good show of how it does the splashdown before. There's one in there where you can actually see the old Kraken mouth off to the side. I can't find it now, but it's there. Oh, there it is. Yeah, number 22. So number 22, you can see the Kraken mouth is kind of like off to the side of the track, and they removed that in favor of the boat a few years later when they built it. It was kind of off to the left of the drop, so they removed that and then put it in the boat part when they added the boat a year later. So really, really cool. All right, let's get to why don't we get to the 2 big ones here, Andy, because these are the 2 that I've been wanting to talk about for a long, long time.
Yes.
And if you've stayed with us here for the first 20 minutes or so of this, you're getting rewarded now with these 2 rides that I was a huge fan of. Let's start with Colossus Kampf der Giganten, which I believe translates to the Battle of Giants. I could be wrong there. It's close there. But so Colossus was the Intamin plug-and-play wood coaster that opened in 2001 and closed in 2008, or was standing but not operating from 2016 to 2019, and reopened later in 2019 with the retract, a completely retract, not RMC. They completely retract the coaster back to its original form. Now, a lot of reports were that the ride was getting very rough. It was difficult to ride even once. And people like myself and other folks have said that El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure, which is the same style of ride, has gotten the same way in recent years. So I was skeptical of this ride, one, because I am not an El Toro fan, right?
We're not. There is no one that will accuse you of being an El Toro fan. No one.
Right. And this ride, I put number 5 on my road trip rundown of most anticipated wood coasters because I am not an El Toro fan. And I said that my hope was that the first half of El Toro is spectacular. It's got 3 of the best airtime hills in the world. And this looks like it has very, very similar hills. Where this one I was hoping would set itself apart is the return run. My criticism of El Toro in general is that the second half is a lot of turns, and aside from the one crossover hill, there's really not any airtime. It's sort of 2 stories, and the rhythm isn't quite there. It's not really a bounce ride. You've got a bunch of airtime, and then you've got a bunch of turns, and it's like I kind of want some mixed in there. This ride was a very good mix. Now, there's not a whole lot of turns in this ride. It is mostly just airtime, but I'll take airtime over turns. So this ride was butter smooth, thanks to the retracking. Feel very fortunate because I know what this ride was probably like a few years ago before they retracked it, because it's probably very similar to what El Toro is today in terms of roughness. So very fortunate that we got to ride this in its first year back. As expected, the first drop, very good, very El Toro-like. The next couple hills, very El Toro-like, very, very good. The turnaround, very strong. Very happy with the airtime up until the mid-course brake run. There is a mid-course brake run, which is kind of weird. It's sort of a flat bit, and then it does this slow helix where you start to gain speed. And this is sort of where I got to the point where it's like, okay, this is the ending of El Toro, right? The part that I could do without, or I wish there was something more happening. But unlike El Toro, where you do a couple of turns and then you hop onto the brake run, you come out of this helix and you do 3 very strong bunny hills. And that, to me, is where this ride sets itself apart from El Toro. I don't rank it extremely higher than El Toro because I don't think it's significantly better than El Toro, but I do think it's better. I think it has a better rhythm. It has a better overall pacing to it. I think the rhythm and sort of the story it tells, right, as a roller coaster is better, and it finishes much, much better. To me, El Toro these days is dying out. It goes through those turns and you slowly get back to the brake run, and it starts off really intense and then it sort of just peters out at the end. El Toro does. This ride has a really good opening act and it sort of peters out in the middle, but then it hits you with those 3 bunny hills at the very end, which are very, very strong, very good airtime, arguably some of the best airtime on the ride. And again, with this refurbishment, they added the theming. So they added this Wicker Man style tree that encloses the third and last bunny hill. And the coolest thing is they have it holding a piece of track off to the side. And the visual is excellent here. When you come over that second bunny hop, it really looks as if that thing is ripping up the track because there's fog coming out of it and it shoots fire right as you come over the top of the second lift hill. So this giant tree-like thing shoots fire out. The fog is hiding the fact that the track goes into its mouth, so you can't see the track going into its mouth. And the dummy track is an excellent head chopper right above the track that you are on, so it really does look as if you are about to go flying off the track because this monster thing is ripping it up. And then, of course, you go underneath it. It's a really good head chopper effect. And then Jeff just sent me a message there. He must be messaging Jeff while we're talking about this.
I said to Jeff, I said he's bitching about El Toro right now.
All right. Here we go, Jeff. This is all for you. But again, you don't get that little added Easter egg. You don't get that theming. You don't get that sort of visual scare factor on El Toro. You get a few more little. And again, there's projection screens and fire in the station of this ride, telling you the story of how Colossus was once this mighty giant, and nature had threatened to tear Colossus down, and Colossus has returned as the dominant giant, right? So there is a little bit of a story, and they're telling that story in the station, and it's a big deal. And you can tell too that the people who frequent this park are very, very happy to have this ride back, and this is sort of a ride that they take a lot of pride in. So this is certainly one of the stars of this park and Germany in general. I think this is one of the rides that is sort of iconic, in much in the same way that El Toro is iconic here in the United States. So I was very, very pleased with this ride. I was very, very happy with the experience it provided. It is not a top 10 coaster for me, just like El Toro is not. For me, this ride is, we talked about Q Cullen yesterday, and how that was number 5 on my wood coaster list at the end of the trip. Colossus, I would put in at number 4. This, to me, is right on the edge of a top 20, top 25 wood coaster for me.
I have to take a moment to go review my top 10 list, because they're right over here on my wall. And because I want to see where I have El Toro currently.
Here we go.
So I have El Toro currently at 7. So one.
Well, that's way too high.
Yeah, way too high. One would posture that maybe El Toro for me, or this Colossus, could be a top 5 ride.
Perhaps. The one reason that I would say maybe not is I feel like the mid-course brake run and sort of the helix that follows it before the bunny hills at the end. It does take those that set of elements at a rather leisurely pace. So I would seem to think that, and that's typically something that you are not a big fan of. You're not a fan of when rides sort of come to an end with a whimper, but this ride doesn't do that. It doesn't end with a whimper. The whimper is sort of in the middle of the ride, and then it hits you with 3 action-packed moments at the end, the visual, the theming at the end, and then you sort of do the turnaround into the station. So I'm honestly not sure how you would, because El Toro to me ends with a whimper. The whimper on this ride is in the same spot. It would almost be as if it's almost as if you took El Toro and you put 3 bunny hops at the end after all the turns. That's kind of what this ride is. It has the whimper there in the middle where it feels like you're kind of dying out, but then it hits you with 3 really good airtime hills at the end, which El Toro doesn't do.
And like, my thing is too, like, I keep thinking of Superman / Bizarro, and it has those bunny hills at the end that I'm not a fan of at all, and I get a little worried because they have new trains on these.
But that's a restraint thing, right?
Yeah. And how are the restraints on the new trains? Because
they're fine. In my opinion, they are fine. And it's been a while. I actually seem to forget if they still have. This ride used to have the Millennium Force T-bar restraints.
Yeah.
I forget if it still does or if it has the El Toro restraints now. I forget. It's been a while. The restraints did not bother me. Now, El Toro, the restraints have never bothered me on El Toro. That's never been a thing for me.
Well, my thing too is El Toro was probably one of the tightest fits I've ever had on a roller coaster. I'm looking at some video or some pictures right now. I'm convinced I would not fit on El Toro today if I had to go ride it. So that's the other thing too, is if these are a little bit more forgiving than El Toro is.
Yeah, I think they are. Boy, I am trying to find
There's not any good pictures. It's hard to find a good picture here.
I did find one. I did find one. It does. Okay, so they do have the El Toro style trains on there now and the El Toro lap bars. I do see. I would have remembered if they had the T-bars because I know Expedition G-Force still has the T-bars that Millennium Force have. So it does have the El Toro style restraints now. They got new trains, which maybe helped. I don't know. But the restraints have never bothered me on El Toro. They didn't bother me on this ride either.
Yeah, well, we shall see. Interesting. And like I said, in my top 6 above El Toro, you got some heavy hitters. They'd have to be better than like Mystic Timbers or
No, I do not think
Run.
No, I do not think that ride is in this category. This ride is in, for me, this is in a category right around Goliath at Great America and Shivering Timbers. I think Shivering Timbers is a very fair comparison to this ride. How about that?
Okay.
I think the airtime is stronger. I think Shivering Timbers has a little bit less downtime in terms of the ride experience, where this has sort of like the helix and the mid-course brake run, which Shivering Timbers doesn't really have. But Shivering Timbers has a lot of floating airtime, whereas this has a lot more ejector airtime. So I think this would be a comparable to me to like a Shivering Timbers type ride. I would compare it to Shivering Timbers more than I compare it to El Toro. The comparison to El Toro for me starts and ends with the plug and play and the trains. I think it rides more like a Shivering Timbers. It's smoother than a Shivering Timbers for sure. But I think the feel of the ride and the layout of the ride is much more comparable to a Shivering Timbers.
Okay. Interesting.
So where do you rank Shivering Timbers? Do you have to go and look at your board again? Or?
Well, it's Shivering Timbers is like around 15, I think, if I had to guess. But I'll go look at the board for. I got Shivering Timbers at 12. So there's a possibility that this is a top 10 wood coaster for me.
It could be
a very real possibility.
It could be. Yeah, no, this was, again, I really, really enjoyed this ride. This was one of these rides that I was very, very cautiously optimistic about this ride when we talked about it, and I was very, very pleased. We rode this ride, I think, 6 or 7 times. I like this ride quite a bit.
Did you happen, they got a lot of cool merchandise for this ride in these pictures. Did you happen to pick up anything?
They do. Actually, if you'll indulge for a minute, because I know it's on top of my pile. So, as I talked about, Thorpe Park and Alton Towers are pretty good with merchandise. The Merlin parks in general are pretty good with merchandise. In Europe in general, they're not very good. But this park, the main store out front, had a dedicated section of the store for every major coaster. So Croquet had an entire wall of T-shirts, the resins, mugs, and plush toys even of like an octopus. Colossus, I got a Croquet mug, which is like a barrel, and the handle of the mug is an octopus tentacle. So that's really cool. I got a Colossus with the fire logo mug. I got a T-shirt, which is right here. Fleur de Démon, I got a T-shirt, I got a mug, and I also got a resin, which I'll grab in a minute. This is the park that I bought by far the most merchandise at. So the shirt they had that I got is like the Twisted Timbers in Fury 325, they have the sublimated shirts. So this one is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got the little Colossus logo down there in the bottom corner.
Uh-huh.
And then it's the same thing on the back, right? So it's the track being held up by the giant guy. So very, very cool. So I got that, and it's the lightweight sublimated. So that's really, really cool. But this park by far had the best merchandise of any park on the trip. So I'll pull out the other big thing here, which will bring us into our last. Any other questions on Colossus before we get there? I think we've covered that pretty well. Let's get to what I've been teasing as the runaway surprise of the trip. And this is Fleur de Démon. So here's the resin print, the 3D printed resin. And I have one from Alton Towers of Nemesis as well. But this is super, super cool. So Fleur de Démon is the B&M wing coaster. And, Andy, you and I talked a week or about a month ago when we started hearing these rumors about the King's Dominion wing coaster, right?
Yeah.
And I mentioned this ride. I never thought that I would ride a wing coaster that I liked better than Thunderbird. And then I rode this ride. Me and you have always been in agreement that Thunderbird, that's the wing coaster there. You've got the launch, you've got the intense forces, you've got some great inversions, you've got a fly through. Thunderbird is a short ride, but it's got all the good things that make a wing coaster. You've got a good location, you've got good theming. You've even got theming in the launch area. The launch is very unique for the wing coaster. It's the only one of its kind, at least from a B&M standpoint. You got some really intense moments. But this ride is just in a completely different world. And this goes back to the point that I made when we were talking about King's Dominion. So let me set the stage for you. This ride is in a completely separate area of the park. It's in the Transylvania area of the park. So it's completely themed sort of in its own area. This ride, this is the ride. The ride is the themed area. And it is themed to, and so Fleur de Démon, the way it's written, Fleur de Démonen, is translates to Flight of the Demons. And the theme here is that there is a pack of demons flying about the Transylvania town and terrorizing the town. That's the theme that we've set here. So, if I'm setting the stage with the stats here, 131 foot height. I believe what that is referring to is from the top of the lift hill to the lowest point of the ride, which is towards the end of the ride. So this ride is perched on the same hill on the left side of the park that Bobbin is.
Yeah.
So the station is much, much lower. The station is close to the low point. And then the lift hill takes you up to your height, which is about 130 feet. It's got the wing over drop, much like X-Flight and Gatekeeper, but those rides you tilt down to the right. This one tilts to the left. Now, maybe that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when you've ridden X-Flight and Gatekeeper as much as I have, and Swarm I think goes the other way as well. So, but when you've ridden Gatekeeper and X-Flight as much as I have, when it goes the other way, it surprises you. Now, I've always been a big supporter of riding the wing coasters in the front seat. We talk about how the wing coasters, what makes the wing coasters is the near misses, the elements that use the near misses, the visuals, right? We've always talked about how a lot of times the wing coasters are best when you take advantage of the fact that you are far away from the track and you can maximize the sensation of speed by bringing you close to other things. However, this ride was decisively a back row ride, and here's why. So, I don't know if that roll at the top of the lift hill is tighter or what, but when you are on the back right wing and you go through that wing over drop, you are thrown out of your seat. Now, again, here's another thing. Gatekeeper, X-Flight, these big wing coasters are 8 cars. Thunderbird's only 5. This one is 6. Mm-hmm. So here's what happens. What ends up happening is you're able to take these elements. I think the twists and turns are a little bit tighter because the train isn't as long and you don't have to account for the forces in a longer train, right? So you go over this wing over drop and you get thrown up out of your seat as you start to do the twist. So then you go through the wing over drop and you're floating out of your seat the entire time. The vests do not lock, so that's good. So you're floating out of your seat the entire time. At the bottom of that drop, you go underneath a bridge. And each time you go through a building or under something or near a building or a structure on this ride, there are speakers. They're not on the train. They're hidden in the scenery of the demons screeching. So every time you fly through a small opening, you hear the demons screeching. So you go underneath this bridge and you hear the as you go underneath the bridge. Now, after a big wing over drop on X-Flight, what do we get? We get a 0G roll, right? On Gatekeeper, we get a big element. You get a big sweeping element after the wing over drop on all these big wing coasters, right? What do you get here? You get a 40-foot speed hill with tons of airtime. Tons of airtime, okay? So you hear the demon screeching as you go
with
under
the vests, you still
even with the vest, Andy, and you know me. I am not a fan of the vests on the dive coasters, but you get tons of airtime here. So you hear the screeching of the demons as you go underneath the bridge. You come up and you do the speed hill. You are floating out of your seat. You're getting ejector airtime, arguably better airtime than you get on most of the B&M hyper coasters here. And as you go down the other side of the hill, it's not a straight hill on the other side. There's a kink to the left. So as you're floating out of your seat, you get this jolt to the right-hand side, and then you dive underneath the gift shop, a la Tremors at Silverwood. So you go underneath the gift shop in a keyhole-type element, and as you're going through the building, you hear the demons screeching again. And then you go through the Immelman, and you come out of this Immelman, you go through a 0G roll, which rolls right. So when you're on the right side of the train, you get a lot of this hang time. You're falling to the right, kind of like I'm trying to do in my chair right now. You're falling out of your seat. You're falling to the right. And then out of the 0G roll, so here's where it gets really weird, right? So you're still kind of up on the hill while all of this is happening. So you're still like 50 feet above the low point of the ground. So your height is 130 feet, but actually you're only maybe 80 or 90 feet down so far. So you're still kind of up on the hill while all this is happening. So the drop isn't that big, but you still got all this other stuff going on, right? So then the exit of the 0G roll is much, much higher than the entrance. So what happens is you do this big sweeping overbank turn, and it goes right up against the station of Bobbin off to the back. So when you're on the right-hand side of this train, you do the sweeping overbank turn where you're basically at 90 degrees, and your feet are near missing with the station of the other roller coaster that's nowhere near where you enter this ride, right? So then is where the ride really starts to pick up. So at this point, you've got the speed through the speed hill, the Immelman, you've got some float in the Immelman, you've got some float in the 0G roll, and then you start to lose just a little bit of speed going through this helix, and you're thinking, okay, what are we going to do next? Then you have this huge drop out of the overbank turn, which takes you down farther into the valley, and then you enter the signature element of this ride, which is unique to this ride, and it is called the demonic knot. So the demonic knot has to be, and excuse my language if you're younger here, fast forward maybe about 15 seconds. The demonic knot has to be the single most fucked up element I have ever experienced on any roller coaster in this entire world. Because here's what it does. We all know how a 0G works, or a Cobra roll works. We all know how a Batwing works. We all know how a Pretzel Loop works. The best way I can try to describe this is if you take the Norwegian loop from Fahrenheit at Hershey Park and tilt it on its side and then put wing coaster trains on it, that's kind of what happens. So here's what happens. You enter this and you start to roll to the left like you're going to do a 0G roll. And while you're upside down, the track starts to curve. So you're like hanging upside down, and it rolls out of it like a half loop, sort of like a dive loop, tilted 45 degrees to the side. So what that means is on the right side of the train, you end up going high, right? So you're getting tilted up high, and you're upside down, and you go all the way across the track, and you're upside down, and then you start to roll out of it like a half loop, but it's tilted on its edge. So not only are you falling out of your seat because you're basically sort of doing a similar element to the wing overdrop, you're also tilted on your side. So you're falling out of your seat, but you're also being thrown to the side of the seat. And then because you're on your side, you come into the bottom of the drop at an angle, like you're going through a bank turn. So it's sort of like you're doing a bank turnaround of sorts. Now, of course, what's at the bottom of the bank turnaround? More demon screeches, right? Then you go in. So this is that's just the first half of the element. The second half of the element is that same thing in reverse. And you go through another half loop, sort of like an Immelman, but again, you're tilted at 45 degrees. So if you're on RCDB, look at picture number 50 on Fleur de Démon, and right in the middle of picture number 50, right above the Immelman of Croquet, is the demonic knot. So, and I should have said that when I started this. So you roll right, you do the half loop, then you come to the bottom and you're banked at, say, 30 degrees. You go through another half loop, and when you're on the right side of the train, you're essentially upside down already, and then it finishes like a corkscrew, and it finishes by rolling right to the corkscrew. So you've got like 2 or 3 seconds of float as you enter the element. Then you're going through this big sweeping loop at the bottom. You're getting pummeled with G-forces for 2 or 3 seconds. And at this point, this is the low point of the ride, not at the bottom of the first drop. If you look at the height difference, you can see there's 30 to 40 feet difference in height. So you're reaching your 62 miles an hour top speed at this point of the ride. So you're getting pummeled with G-forces. And then you go back to falling out of your seat, and because the train is upside down for so long, you're just hanging there for another 2 to 3 seconds, falling out of your seat, falling to the right, not knowing which direction's up, thoroughly confused by this element. Rode this ride 14 times and still couldn't tell you which way was up at any point in this element. And then, for added good measure, and I'm trying to find a good picture of this again. Boy, the construction of that demonic knot really kind of shows you how weird it is. Boy, it's really fun to look at. Then you do, after you exit the demonic knot, you drop under the brake run that's at the end of the ride, and then you go up into this weird. It's like a Stengel dive where you go up, and it's like an RMC wave turn. It feels like an RMC wave turn that you have on like Outlaw Run or Twisted Cyclone or Lightning Rod, where you're going up and it sort of crests the top of the bunny hill while you're on your side. So you get banked up, and when you're on the right side of the wing, you're going high again. So you get thrown out of your seat because the train is banking 90 degrees, and then it sort of crests a small hill, so you're thrown out of your seat again, all while you're being thrown to the right. And then you do another powerful sweeping left-hand turn where you come close to the ground again, and then you come back up to the brake run. And my description of it does not do it justice. This is a ride that on my most anticipated list, I had number 8 on my steel list, which was below Silver Star, below Olympia Looping, below Blue Fire Mega Coaster, below Goliath at Wallaby Holland, just one step above Black Mamba. The big 3 on this ride were Untamed, Terran, and Expedition G-Force, and we haven't talked about Expedition G-Force yet, but those are the big 3. Fleur de Démon, after those big 3, by far my favorite ride of the entire trip. After those 3, by far my favorite steel coaster outside of the big 3. The most surprising, and by far just the absolute shock of the trip. This ride was just so much more than what I could have ever possibly hoped for. Adam and I rode this ride. We took our quick queue passes. Even after Tony and Chris and Sue all tapped out, we just kept going right up until closing. And we rode this ride. I don't know what the exact count was. I don't have it in front of me. 14, 15 times. And we went to that back right wing almost every single time. We tried it in back left, front right. And after we tried it in all three spots, that back right wing, boy, that is the sweet spot right there. There are not many seats on any roller coaster that are much better than the back right wing on Fleur de Mont. What did we say coming into the break run? Now that's a ride.
Now that's a ride.
That's boy. This one was a lot of fun.
And you just look at it, and I'm looking at that picture number 50 again, and you just look at it, and you see that airtime hill coming off that first drop. You see all this craziness going on. It's hard to tell.
It doesn't look right. It doesn't look right.
And you don't get a good sense because you got the white bobsled track back there. You got this other white track up front from.
That's the other thing. So Bobbin, Limit, Fleur de Mont, and is there another one? Oh, Big Loop.
Yeah.
All four of those coasters in that area of the park are white track and like dark green supports, and I believe that's to blend in with the sky and the trees. I don't think, because now Croquet is black, which doesn't make sense, and then Desert Race is black and gold. But it's like they ordered, like they meant to order 5 buckets of paint, and instead they got 500. So every steel coaster they built after Big Loop got the same paint job. But sorry, but that's a funny thing about it. But yeah, go ahead with your thoughts there.
No, yeah, it's just you just look at it, and it looks like it does this crazy stuff, and you would hope that when we talk about Kings Dominion, we talk about the wing coaster possibly going in there again, and it doesn't seem like they're going to do this though. It doesn't seem like here you have something that, how many times have I said this? We need a wing coaster that breaks the mold, and Thunderbird did it a little bit because it had the first launch on it, but still, once you get past that first launch, it's doing a lot of what the wing coaster does. But this is one that really seems like it breaks the mold of what a wing coaster should do. That wing over drop into an airtime hill, craziness right there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's and this ride more than any other ride. I mean, we expected Untamed to be an absolutely spectacular ride. We expected Terran to be a spectacular ride. Hopefully, we expected Expedition G-Force to be a spectacular ride. This ride was one of those that we were excited for, but had no idea what to expect. This was the ride on big trips like this. There's always a ride that you ride early on in the trip that you talk about for the rest of the trip when you do big road trips like this. I remember when we did our Memorial Day trip in 2015, it was Renegade. That was the ride we talked about the rest of the trip, which was leading up to Hollywood Nights. Fleur de Mont was the ride that we talked about for the entirety of the trip. And this wasn't on the group part of the trip. There were lots of people on the group part of the trip who did not go to this park and did not ride this ride. And there were so many people who, when we went to Toverland, loved Phoenix, the wing coaster there at Toverland. And we said to them, if you liked Phoenix, you've got to go ride Fleur de Mont, because Fleur de Mont, quite honestly, Phoenix is a really nice ride. Fleur de Mont shits all over every other wing coaster that I've ridden, in my opinion. And that's the other thing. We were talking about, after 1 or 2 rides, we were saying, this ride's better than Thunderbird. And it's not close. It's not like it was a debate. We got off and you like to joke around with me about how, it takes you a bunch of rides to figure out what you think of a ride. This ride, we rode it 1 or 2 times, and we looked at each other and says, this ride's better than Thunderbird, and it's not even a debate. It's not even up for discussion.
Yeah.
Cool. This ride for me is in my top 15 overall steel coaster list. That's how high it is. And we're talking, 700 plus coasters, just about, or 600 some. I don't even know what the number is, and it doesn't matter. But 600 coasters on my steel list, and just about more than that. And a top 15 ride. I mean, that's telling you what this. For me, this is a ride that I rank above Montu. I rank it above Kumba. I rank it above Thunderbird. I rank it above a lot of the B&M hypercoasters even. I mean, this is a special ride.
Well, that's exciting because it's always fun. I think, when you ride these coasters and you think, oh, there's going to be just another wing coaster, there's going to be just another of that, and then something jumps out, and we say it in the beginning of the Thrilling 32, searching for that one ride, it's sometimes not easy to find that one ride, and sometimes you start riding stuff and everything feels the same, but then you get something
searching
like this.
For that one special ride that stands out among the rest. This was that one special ride on this trip.
And that's the cool thing about it is that's why you go and do this stuff. That's why, that's why you travel to find something like this, because you listen to the people and not a lot of people talking about this one. And you wonder why. Well, you went out and now this is something I want to go ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, bold prediction, maybe not so bold prediction because our group very much enjoyed this ride overall. I expect to see this ride, Fleur de Démon, in the Thrilling 32 this year. I think it's going to be there.
Okay. Yeah, let's hopefully we'll see that.
Thunderbird's been there. Gatekeeper's been there in the past. I think we could see it.
That would be exciting to get something new like this and to see what it does. I probably not gonna make a deep run, but you never know.
And I'll get to talk about it some more. I can't talk enough about this ride. This was just so much fun. We should end the show because otherwise I'll just keep going on and on about.
Well, before we end the show, what about so this park, Heide Park, somewhere you should go? It sounds like, right?
Oh, absolutely. So to give you some perspective, we sort of based ourselves in Hamburg for a few days. Hansa Park is about an hour and 10 minutes north of Hamburg, up on the Baltic Sea. This park is about an hour and 10 minutes south of Hamburg. So if you were to, this is a park, and all these parks, Hamburg is 5 hours north of Frankfurt, and Frankfurt is sort of the starting point for where we were on the other parks like Movie Park and Movie Park, and then eventually Europa Park and Tripsdrill Holiday Park, which are more southern Germany. These parks are in northern Germany. So if you are going to do a Germany trip, if you do Heide Park, you can also do Hansa Park. Add an extra day, stay somewhere in Hamburg, and you are equidistant from the two parks in opposite directions. You could go to Hansa Park one day, second day you go to Heide Park, and then you can continue on south towards some of the other parks like Movie Park, Phantasialand. It's very easy. Heide Park and Hansa Park, in my opinion, if you do one, the other one is low-hanging fruit. On a trip, you're either doing neither of them or you're doing both of them if you're doing a big Europe trip. The other thing, the station on this ride is so super cool because I saw a picture of it here. So it's like the chandelier, haunted church style. It's like the haunted church of the town. And it's got the weird chandeliers that are flickering. And it says in German, I forget the exact translation, what it says, but it says, will you be saved or will you be damned? Something like that. It says it in German. I forget the exact translation. Sue translated it for us in the line, but super, super cool. But anyways, yes, Heide Park and Hansa Park are easy to do on 2 consecutive days. You stay in Hamburg. You go to one day, you go to the other day. My suggestion would be to do Hansa Park one day, and then you can do Heide Park the second day, and then you can continue on south towards your other German parks that you would have on such a road trip. But definitely worth doing both. This was definitely one of the top parks of the trip. 1 or 2 dark rides, very, very nice theming, a great pretzel and beer selection again, some great roller coasters, and by far the best merchandise of the trip. You know, I would say this was definitely in the top 5 parks on the entire trip for sure. This is a standout park in my opinion.
Okay. So as always, thank you for joining us here on COASTER-net Uncut. We've got only a few more actually. I think 3 more of these shows left to go. So we are almost there towards the end, but we got some big hitters, like I said before, Europa, Effling, and then the big holiday park to talk about Expedition G-Force. So thank you, as always, for joining us here. I'm, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Right Warriors.
See you next time, guys.